I never really wanted to be a writer. I never had aspirations when I was a child to be a writer. It never really even crossed my mind that books were written by a person. And I mean, I loved books, but I loved books because they were physical. I loved the physical object of the books. 100 years later, I'm still always really interested in the way that my books are presented. Like I have a lot of input into the typeface they use and the covers they put on and the titles and all sorts of things like that. But when I started writing as a child because, for a lot of reasons, some of that reason was that I was a not very effective kind of person. I was not very good at anything. I felt I was one of 6 children, and I didn't really feel that I had any power in the world. And that's not what I was thinking when I was 9 years old, obviously, but looking back on it, I think that I wrote because it gave me some control over my existence. I published I sent that first book to the publisher because a friend said, "Why don't you?" And she actually said, "What have you got to lose?" I didn't think that nearly 40 years later I would be sitting here still talking about books, and that they would be my life. It became something, writing books became something that I did because I didn't do anything else. But it's been an interesting way to fall into a career that a lot of people would give their right arms to have had, and I'm aware that I have been very lucky. But had I not written that first book and had I not sent it in, I don't know, you always think about the path you didn't take. Well, you don't always think about it, but there were plenty of times I could have taken a different path.
I haven't read that book, I must confess.
Yeah, well, you're not missing much. Although, I mean,
what was it about, Sonya?
it was about, look, when I was 13, I was reading books. In the 80s, when I was a teenager, there was a lot of, there was nothing like the amount of stuff around for teenagers that there is now. There was basically no category of teenage writing, except for people like, well, there was the odd exception like Ivan Southall in Australia, but by and large we read in the 80s, Susie Hinton, Paul Zindel, and Robert Cormier were the three writers that got passed around. I went to Siena and in Camberwell, and those were the books that we all passed around. And I loved them, we all loved them, but I do remember thinking, where is the book about a kid growing up in Box Hill? They were all really good books about gangs and stuff in LA, but I just thought these people aren't the people that I know. And it wasn't actually until I read Ivan Southall's Josh that I realised that it was actually possible to write about an Australian child in Australia. My mum used to take us up to Goondiwindi every year when we were kids, and which is a little country town, well, not little, but a country town on the Queensland border. And Josh, Ivan Southall's Josh, was about a boy that came from the city, and as far as I can recall, it was about a boy that came from the city and had to live in the country. And I thought, well, that is a life I recognise. And if he can write that, I can write something too.
We're so glad that you did.
I still wouldn't read it, although you know, for many, many years, the way it is with your juvenilia, you just go, oh my God, horror, horror. I wish every copy had been burned. And in fact, there was only ever 1,500 copies printed, so it's as rare as hen's teeth. But for truly decades, I couldn't bring myself to look at it. But then I had to read it once for something I had to write for The Age, and I read it and I thought, it's not as bad as I thought. It's actually not too bad. I mean, you know, it shows the fact that it was written by somebody pretty young and inexperienced, and it also was edited by somebody very old and uptight. And it shows that. But underneath, like, I read it thinking, what did the person at Rigby's see in this manuscript that made them publish it? For years, I always thought that what they saw was the fact that I was 15 and sort of marketable. But when I read it, I thought, yeah, for somebody who was 13 when they wrote this book, it's not a bad effort. I still wouldn't recommend it, but it's not too bad. Right since being a very young child, I have loved animals and felt, I've never been completely at ease with people, but I've always felt at ease with animals, and I've always felt a natural affinity for dealing with them and thinking about and sort of seeing the world that they might see. I guess as somebody who has had to live a very public life but is quite intrinsically shy, although people go, yeah, right, but I've had to become a person that could get on stage and talk to strangers and make conversation very easily and stuff. But underneath, I'm this snivelling creature that just goes, I can't think of anything to say, everything I'm saying is stupid, oh my God. And you don't have that around animals. But also, so I feel a kind of peace around them, but also I really like the fact that humans are animals as well, that you do not have to dig very far underneath the surface to see the animal in us, and to interpret our behaviour on absolutely kind of natural lines, that we are an animal and we behave like animals. And that's, I think, why I kind of like writing about children, because they're much more ready to behave like animals. But in my own personal life, I'm not married, I don't have any children. Animals have been the thing that is important to me. I have at the moment a little pound dog and a little Siamese cat who fought with next door neighbour's cat the other day and got a big abscess, and I took her to the vet and handed her over. I said, be aware, this creature is my entire world. The dog, he goes, no pressure then. You know, if she dies, I will die. Mind you, my beautiful dog, Shy, I mean, a lot of people think that they are kind of feel that they know my animals almost because I've written about them in newspapers and things like that. But my dog, my very quite well-known dog Shiloh, died in 2013, and since he died I felt kind of a bit alone. He was like a great big wolf, and now there's just, even though I have a little dog I got from the RSPCA, I feel more alone without him. So they're important to me, and I don't care if people think that is stupid, but yeah, some of my greatest friends have been animals. Well, it was not an easy book to write, especially when I knew that with every sentence had to be really thought about. All right, I know how a person would deal with this, but how would a cat deal with this? But also, so it required a great deal of effort and concentration, but always I was aware that book would be not taken seriously as a work of literature at all, because it was from the point of view of cats, and people have a kind of bias against that kind of genre. But I've always believed that if you're a writer, you should test yourself, test your abilities, and writing Forrest was kind of an exercise in that, of seeing, can it be done? Can I do it? And I did it then, but I don't think I'd try it again. It was It was not easy, and like Homer Simpson, I only do things if they're easy. I was young then, I had the energy. Now it's too much. But yeah, it was, I mean, it's weird talking about books like that are really, really old. It's almost like another life. When I wrote a book like that, I can't even, I mean, that book, Life in 10 Houses, I wrote Forrest in, I think, about house number 3 or 2. So it's been a while, but I do remember just going, never again. But there was lots of practical reasons why I had to choose cats. You know, you needed an animal that could look after itself and that sort of thing. Not because I'm a mad cat fan or anything, apart from my Siamese cat, of course. Well, basically, you think them up. It's part of the job. I know that there's a kind of sense amongst a lot of people that somehow I'm able, or other writers are able to tap into something that most people can't. But in fact, writing is work like any other job. If I want to write a book, I have to sit down and I have to think, right, from an absolute little tiny grain of sand, you have to create something. And the only way you get the something is by painstakingly adding more and more and more grains of sand until you have, although that's not the way I tend not to think of them as grains of sand, I tend to think of them as clouds. But it's not a romantic occupation at all. It is a matter of sitting down and going, does this work? Will this carry the book? If not, out. And it's almost, in many ways, a kind of mathematical business. Does this fit? Does this balance? Does this match? And to be able to write in that very mathematical way takes years and years, or it has taken me years and years and years to work out. I've never had I've never done a writing course or anything. Everything I know about writing I have learnt from trial and error and from reading other writers. And I don't think that if you want to be a writer, you need to do a writing course or anything like that. What you need to do is read and read and read and write and write and write and be prepared to make mistake after mistake after mistake. I am now an absolutely professional writer. When I sit down to write a book, when I wrote Trouble All the Way, which is this thick, it took me 8 months. I can write a book like Golden Boys now. When I sit down at the computer, I can do it in 4 weeks. But behind it, there's probably 2 years at least of thinking, of gathering all the clouds together and thinking, does this work? Who will the characters be? What will the point of view be? What's it going to be about? So I will start a book with an idea. In the case of Golden Boys, or maybe I should use a better known book. Which book? They're all going, don't pick me, don't pick me. Well, The Children of the King, all right. I always write, and I would recommend this to anybody who wants to be a writer, only write about what interests you. Don't even try to write about a topic that you're not interested in. It's a waste of your time, let alone the waste of the time of the rest of the world, because you won't write convincing. You will never find me writing a book about sport. I'm not interested in sport. I'm not going to write convincingly about sport, and I just won't touch it. But The Children of the King is about basically I started off thinking, right, okay, I've always wanted to write a book about the princes in the tower. It's a subject that I've always long been interested in, simply because it's a really good story. And when I first heard about it when I was at school in maybe year 7, immediately it grabbed me, and it's just a really rich, interesting story. And I've mentioned it before in a couple of other books, or I've alluded to it, but I thought this time I'm going to write a book about the princes in the tower. All right, so you've got that. That's your first cloud. But I don't want the book to be about the princes in the tower. I want it also to be about another topic that interests me, which is the evacuation of children during the Second World War. Okay, so if you're going to have those two, how are you going to bridge the distance between the 500 years between those two events? And then you start to go, all right, if it's not going to be about the children, the princes themselves, who is it going to be about? It's going to be about the evacuated child. In the end, it became about a child that takes in the evacuee rather than about the evacuee itself. You've got to be prepared to have a little leeway. You've got to listen to what the book wants. It didn't want May to be the main character, it wanted Cecily to be the main character, and I have learnt that if the book really wants something, the book gets it. There's no point fighting the book. If the book goes, I'm going this way, you go with it. I have to hesitate when I say that, because when you're new to writing and you're not as uptight and you know, very regimented about it the way that I am now. When you first start off, you make mistakes and you follow the book. Sometimes you follow the book into a dead end or a pile of mud, or just it peters out and you go, but it's only 2 chapters long. That sort of thing. But it's all right to make those sorts of mistakes. That is how you learn when your idea is not book-worthy, when it's not strong enough. And I threw out an awful lot of stuff when I was a new young writer, but now I don't, but only because of those mountains of stuff I've thrown out in the past. I've said this before, and I will go to my grave saying it. When you're young and you're trying out your talent and you're learning how to do it, you're riding the wild pony. When you become a professional and you're depending on getting a book finished so you can pay your electricity bill, you do dressage. I've actually got here. Sorry if anyone's heard me yap on about all this before, but I think that people, I think it's interesting for. Do you mind? Thank you. What I do when I've gathered enough ideas, enough clouds. So with the Children of the King, you're going to have the princes. You're going to have the evacuees. How are they going to be linked? All right, where are they going to go? They're going to go to Cecily's uncle's house. Somehow the uncle is going to be associated with the princes. How is he going to be associated with the princes? On his property, he's going to have a castle. All those sorts of things. You add idea upon idea upon idea, and each idea you think, will that work? Will that fit with everything else? Is 1 + 1 making 2 in this case? Is it likely? If he's going to have a castle, it means he's going to have to be rich. If I ever give you one piece of advice with your writing, first of all, work out how wealthy your characters are. After that, it's absolutely important though. You don't find really, really rich people called, well, you probably do up in Queensland, but you know, rich people or poor people don't tend to call their children Sacheverell. You know, you always make every decision is based on your character's financial background. Anyway, these are actually the cards of a boy. But when I have enough ideas and I think they all fit together, and I gradually think, all right, for a book like Children of the King, you're going to need a scene, an establishing scene. Cecily at home in London, so we find out what her background is. Then we're going to need a scene on the train, so we know that there's evacuated children on the train. We're going to need a scene at the station. You're going to need coming to the castle, to Peregrine's house. You're going to need all these various different scenes. So I will write them all down, and when I think that I've got enough, you don't need to have 100% of them, but you need to have 80% of them, sometimes it's actually, even when you're doing dressage, it's good to have a little room to manoeuvre if something happens. But it can happen in a small way, something inconsequential, but the plot has to stick to what you have worked out. It has to get from point A to point B. And what I do, I assign a colour to each thread of the plot. Orange might be the princes, yellow might be May's background, blue might be Peregrine's backstory, things like that. Any plot development that matches that colour, if May is orange, what do we know about May's father? There might be a scene where May is at the museum with her father. May at museum with her father. It gets written down. You lay them all out the way the plot is supposed to go. Sorry, I'm not really explaining this very clearly. It's been a while since I explained it. Right, so there you go, rightio. And then you really quickly, and sometimes you might go, I feel that we need a scene here, another bit of orange maybe here, because it doesn't feel mathematically balanced. It's like I'm looking at it going, it's uneven. So I might especially write a scene, come up with some sort of small idea just to put it in there, or else I might take something from here and see, does that work if I put it there? Probably not, that has to go there. So all right, in this case I'd write a scene, because it's very early on in the book. You don't want to pull out something that's a third of the way through the book. It just might not make sense. But then you might go, okay, does it feel good? Does it feel right? Should this go here? Maybe. Is there too much? Maybe there should be a bit of, I don't know, maybe I need more of I tend to rush my endings a bit. Maybe I need to spread it out a little bit before I get to that end bit there. And finally, when I've fiddled with it and I go, it feels good, it feels calm, it feels instinctively correct, then I very quickly, first thing, get a pencil, write down the numbers on them, because I've learnt. And then you sit down, and that's why you can write a book like Golden Boys in 4 weeks, because of this. A book like this is just written like a joining the dots picture is drawn. First scene written, second scene written, third scene written, and you work your way all the way to the end. And it gets you from the start to the end without fail. But it's taken me, as I say, 35 years of writing to be able to do it that way. Never be afraid to ride the wild pony. There's nothing wrong with riding the wild pony. When I lay these cards out, I'll just chuck them down. When I lay them out and explain it, even though I didn't explain it very clearly, it makes it sound easy. But the only way it is easy is if you ride the wild pony first. But it's, people go, isn't it boring to write like that? And yeah, it actually is. It's quite boring to sit down. And apart from the fact that I do allow that little bit of leeway, that, you know, and the leeway comes through in funny ways. When I lay the storyboard out for Children of the King, I thought May was going to be the main character, but Cecily, right from the very start, went, I'm going to be the main character. And that just surprised me, but it didn't affect the plot line. It just presented itself from a different point of view from what I expected. And those sorts of things can always catch you by surprise and make it interesting, but basically it is just work. It's not romantic. And that's not to say that I don't think that, you know, when I'm at the computer, I'm always trying to make it beautiful. The storyboard is not the story. You still have to make it beautiful. You still have to make it flow and everything. But the plot for me is the hard part. Making it flow, making the words right, or as right as I can get them, is less difficult for me. Other writers will say otherwise. Some writers are really good at plot, and they're the writers that tend to sell a lot of books. Books that sell, you know, you think of all the big airport books that sell in their squillions, they're plot driven. No one's really well, not no one, but you don't make a lot of money writing books about inside. Most of the money is books about outside. Oh, I think I wouldn't be the only person in the room that would be able to answer that question. That's a very common affliction. Not many people work not many people have to work. I can't even think straight. I've been rendered stupid at the thought of having to do work. You know, most people have to work hard to get the money that they earn. And really, I work less hard than most. But there's no denying that I have spent really most of my life waking up in the morning and listening to other people go off to work while I just continue to lie in bed and do nothing. So I whinge a lot, but I'm aware that I have still been pretty lucky. But look, it's something that I struggle with on a renewed basis I don't as much anymore, because I think I became old and tired and the fight just sort of beat me down. But I long ago had to accept that if I wanted to write the sort of books that I write, then you're just not going to sell very much. And that's what I meant about books that sell, that are about the inside, don't sell as much as books are about the outside. It is just the way of the world. And I mean, who didn't? Bryce Courtney used to complain that he made a lot of money, but he didn't get critical success. He never won any prizes or anything like that. And I remember saying to him, Bryce, I've got some prizes. Let's swap. Let's swap some of my prizes for some of your, or some of my good reviews for some of your money. But look, you make a mistake if you go into it for the money for a lot of reasons. Not least because in Australia we don't have enough people that read books to make enough money. You get 10% of each book that is sold. A book like Golden Boys, I think in that trade paperback, I think is $29.95, $90 or $99 or something. So that's $3 a copy I will get for each copy that is sold before tax. And in Australia you're likely to sell, the average kind of literary novel will sell about 5,000. So you're looking at, I can't do that math, but it's not a lot of money for what is probably a great deal of work, and certainly a lot of emotional energy and a lot of, you know, really a lot of hope and wishes and dreams are tied up into something like that, if it's particularly amongst your first books. I didn't start being able to really live off my writing until I started to publish overseas. But mostly I live off prizes. And and people go, oh, but you've won lots of prizes and stuff. But I go, well, that's my income. Those books don't sell to any degree worth counting on, really. In fact, when my accountant and I do sort of a yearly forecast of how much I might earn, we don't even take the royalties into account. But as with most things in life, you put up or shut up. So I either write the sort of books that I like to write and I think that some people like to read, and really they're the only types of books I can write, or else I go back and I get a job. So faced with that dilemma, I decide to tighten the old belt a bit occasionally. But look, the very day, and I talk about it in Life in 10 Houses, I think that, and that quote that you said, I think comes from that bit. I was literally, I lived in Preston at the time, in Oakover Road, just down the road from here. And I was walking down Merri Creek with Shiloh, and I thought, I have to go back and ask Andrew to give me my job back at the bookshop because I cannot afford to live. And when I got back to the house, I'd forgotten my mobile, and I picked it up, and there was like 3 phone calls on it, and I went, how weird, somebody must have died. And I pressed the answering machine button was flicking as well, and when I pressed it, there was this voice saying, I am calling, my name is Larry Lampert, I'm calling from Sweden, I'm trying to contact Sonya Hartnett. If this is the right phone number, I'll ring again in 10 minutes and try again. And I looked at Shiloh and said, I don't know anyone in Sweden except ABBA. And then I was aware of the prize, and that went through my mind. But you don't think that that will happen. You just don't. So I just waited for him to ring back, and then he goes, we are ringing to tell you that you, Sonya Hartnett, of Australia. I was just going, finally he spat it out, oh, you have won the prize. And I just, after I got off the phone, I said to Shiloh, our lives are about to change. But the fact that not half an hour earlier I had been down the creek just going, I'm going to have to ring up Andrew in the morning and ask if I can have my job back. And that is one thing I found with writing. It can change in a second. Your life can change. You never know what the postman is going to bring. You never know what the next phone call is going to be. Generally, it's, you know. So would you like to take a survey?
Sonya?
It really depends. With a novel like Golden Boys, I mean, I was seen earlier on in my career as being a writer for young adults, and because I was a writer for young adults, and I was a young adult. But as I kind of got older, I really had my first and only difficulty in kind of being published, because publishers were going, well, you're seen as a writer for teenagers, but you're writing now about people in their 20s, and really there's no market for books about people in their 20s. So, but you're talking about sort of the early 90s. Publishing has really moved on now about what they are prepared to accept as being, you know, to move around within their categories. They do like a book to slot into a space because, like any business, they operate on well-established lines, and it's easier and smoother and probably cheaper for it to run that way. A publishing house has departments, children's, adult, and if a book is hovering in between, then they have to fight with each other and, you know, and it's who comes out alive or who wants the book the most. And quite a few of my books have caused them those problems, but it's been a while. Now I think I write more clearly. I think since I started writing about adults and about children, it's more clear. I mean, I still write a book like The Children of the King, knowing that I'm writing it as a children's book, but aware that when we were kids, my mum used to buy us bikes for our birthdays, and, you know, you'd be this big and she'd come home with a bike this big. She'd go, you have to grow into it. And that's how I kind of write my books for children. you can hold it and you can, you know, a child can read it, but they're not going to get everything out of it in the first reading. Whereas I design it so an adult will be able to say, yes, this is a book for children, but I'm getting a lot out of it nonetheless. Oddly, I'm finding that the more I write about children, I tend to approach my adult books writing them from the point of view of children as well these days. I've done it a few times in Butterfly, in Golden Boys, in Of a Boy. The three books that are a bit of they're not a trilogy, but they nod at each other. When I was writing Golden Boys, the book I thought of most was Of a Boy, and I think anyone who's read the pair of them will see that they are cousins, certainly. And indeed, Of a Boy is the only book whose ending I would change if I was given the chance. And I kept that in mind as I approached the end of Golden Boys. I thought, don't get this one wrong. Some people would say that maybe Of a Boy has the ending it needs to have, and I thought that when I wrote it, and that's why I wrote it, but they're both very suburban books about very ordinary events, and in retrospect, as the years separated me from the writing of a Boy, I thought I should have stuck with the suburban ending. And so Golden Boys gets that sort of ending, I think. I hope. But yeah, I notice as I get older, when I write about adults, I look at it from the point of view of a child. Perhaps because I don't feel, even though I'm like 47 next month, I guess I haven't ever really felt very grown up myself. Maybe because when you don't have kind of adult responsibilities, I don't know. Maybe I'm just juvenile, I don't know. But yeah, but I do like to write about children because they're so wild and crazy. Look, at the time, I might just add here that in the audience is the guy that first employed me when my first job when I was 20, and I was a painter for the Kew Council. I wasn't committed to the job, I don't think. Although, I still do drive. I mean, do you remember Bushy would drive, how we got in trouble because we put in the posts on, in that cutting along in Kew, what's that street? Along Kew, along the freeway there, you were putting the posts in nice and straight, and I said, Bushy, how do we have to put them in so straight? Just whack them in and let's go. Measure them all up and make them all straight and all separate, properly distanced apart. And anyway, then you got in big trouble. We had to go back and do it again. Every time I drive down that street, I remember that. I sat there going, oh, he did it. He's the boss. Not my fault if you listen to me. But look, my problem, one of the reasons I became a writer was because I had no idea what I wanted to do at a time when I should have been doing it or learning how to do it. I blame my parents and my schooling because they certainly gave us no guidance. My mother was a nurse. The only career advice she ever gave her daughters was, don't become a nurse. That was it. But I kind of wish now, I mean, the other day I was driving along with one of my sisters and we were talking about that, and she said, you know, I think if Mum hadn't told us that, I really actually would have liked to have been a nurse. I went, oh, I just felt like, you know, some sort of space-time dimension opened up, that we'd had a future taken away or something, I don't know. But anyway, I think I would have liked to have done medicine. I perhaps would have done something like entomology. I wouldn't have done vet science or anything like that, but maybe medicine. I kind of would have liked that. Also, sometimes I think I would have liked to have been in the police. I don't know why. I just do, like in the dog squad or something. It would have been good. But I have a lot of siblings who actually work in the law and in the courts, and they said, no, you don't want to be a policeman, but police officer. But yeah, I don't know. It's easy when you have a kind of life that has been surprisingly successful to go, I could have done this, I should have done this. But like I said, people think that writing is a romantic career, but in fact it's quite, every day of it is stressful, every day. There's not one day, hardly a minute of my life where I'm not thinking, if I'm not writing a book, I'm thinking, you better get writing a book. If you don't get a book, it's back to the bookshop. You're going to have to go. You know, it's that kind of, you're constantly under pressure. And the only time it's kind of peaceful is when you're actually in the middle of writing a book, because then you know, all right, no one can touch me here. I'm in sanctuary, sort of. But every word takes you closer to the end. And as soon as you put that final full stop in, it all starts again. You've got to come up with another one. There's no ever sense that your work is done, that you are allowed to step back and go, okay, I've done enough. You have to keep doing it and doing it and doing it, because you know, it's a greedy, it's a greedy, squalling child that you have to. The publishers always just go, so what are you writing next? Everybody wants to know, what are you writing next? You're never allowed to go, nothing. I'm never writing ever again. I'm finished. Well, I used to write, I've never written a lot, and now I write almost zero. I'm not a person who likes to condense my blabbing into a short. Look, I know what I like in a short story, and that is plot. If I can't write a short story as well as Roald Dahl could write his adult short stories, I'm not doing it. So, so I tend not to do it anymore, simply because I very rarely think of a good enough idea. And when I edited a few years ago the Best Australian Short Stories, there were a lot that were really, really well written about inside stuff. But I said, well, as the editor, I have to choose based on what is my personal preference, because seriously, there was about 890 of these things, and I was allowed to choose 20. And so I went, I'm going to go with those ones that make me think Roald Dahl would have thought this was a good story. And they were all really plot driven. So, but yeah, I tend, when I write short now, I write things like picture books and stuff, which are a very fine art. A lot of people think that it's a little picture book for children. It's nothing. It's haikuing. It's hard. I had to write 25 novels before I could write a picture book. Look, it's one of those things I don't think about. As I put the ideas together, the tense will come with it. The voice will come, the voice of the book will come, and they choose it themselves. And I don't argue with it. If it wants to be in first person, I say, all right, it's no skin off my nose, it's got to be written in something. If it wants to be in first person, then that's what it gets, which sounds like a really punch me in the face answer, because it doesn't help anyone. But, and probably there is plenty of reasons why I choose first person, but I just can't be bothered thinking what they really sort of are. Like, it's always been easier for me just to go along with it rather than to sit back and go, what is the logic behind, the book doesn't want this, I want this. My brain wants this, so why does my brain want it? But I think when you're writing about children, I think when you're writing about something also like the subject matter of Golden Boys, which has to really go into somebody and go, is this something I want you to question your own behaviour and the behaviour of the people you know when you read this book. And I want you to question your morality and your sense of what is right and wrong. And when you are really trying to get into somebody's head like that, first person is the way to do it, because first person puts you there on the stage with the characters. It doesn't push you back into somebody who's reading a book on your bed. It's saying, you come with us and you think about this situation too. So there. Picture books, what can you say? Again, if you haven't got a plot, a really, really good plot that is not, Daddy and I went to the shops, we saw a dog, we saw a tree. Don't write rubbish like that. The world doesn't need a book like that. What you need is a really, really good story. And I'm not saying that my 3 picture books have a really good story, although the best of them I think is Come Down Cat, the one in the middle, which was actually based on the behaviour of a real cat of mine in the house I lived in Preston. He would get onto the roof and then he couldn't get down because of the way the house was built. And I would climb up this ladder and the ladder just reached the gutter, the edge of the gutter, and I'd climb up and go, come on Marcus, come to me, come to me. He'd go, I don't want to come down, I'm sorry. And I would just go, I'm going to kill you. When I get you, I will skin you. I will skin you and then I will eat your raw, bleeding flesh. And, but then I thought, no, wait on, there's a better way to deal with this. So, but picture books are, my belief is that a picture book is not called a word book. A picture book is about pictures, and it's an interesting exercise for somebody who's made their life working alone to work with an illustrator. Mind you, I had to find a, new, young, vulnerable, ignorant illustrator who didn't realise what she could do or say or get away with, or the demands that she could make. I had to choose somebody that could be bossed around. A lot of them don't like that, but I've trained Lucia well. So yeah, but they're always fun, but and they are relatively, if you can think of the idea, then your work is much done. But picture books, golden rule, fewer words are better. Write it and then cut half of it out and write it again. Well, because the mechanics are done with those cards and with the months of thinking behind it. Once the machinery is in place, once those dots are actually drawn on the page, you have the luxury of being able to join them in any way you would like, with any colour you would like, with any words you want, because you don't have to think anymore about what is really one of the very most difficult aspects of writing a book, which is putting together a sensible, readable, coherent, enjoyable plot. The words, look, and this is something else that has taken me decades to learn how to do, but it's certainly doable. When I start a book, it comes the way it comes with a voice and it comes with a tune. It's as much a song as anything. And when I sit down to write and I'm sure that I've got a good plot all written, sticky taped to the table in front of me, I can hear a tune for the words themselves. And I can hear immediately if the tune is wrong. If a sentence starts to go la la la, clunk, 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 I can hear that, and I immediately can delete 2 or 3 words and go back to the la la bit. Whereas if we'd been having this conversation 25 years ago, I would have said, well, yeah, I then wrote 3 chapters that I had to throw in the bin because I couldn't hear the tune then. But I have trained myself to listen to the voice of the book. And, you know, a book is a work of art. That's how you should approach it. I mean, a painter would find the right canvas, the right size, they'd stretch it nice and tight and do all that physical, mechanical work. But then comes the colour and the design and the beauty of the picture, painted on a really good, strong canvas, a work of art. And everything about the book, in the way everything about a painting should work and should be pleasing and right. People have a bit of a wrong idea about what an editor does, although I guess there are some editors that would strip a book to pieces, and indeed Trouble All the Way, as I said, was edited by somebody who edited it and didn't involve me in the process at all. Also, he changed a 14-year-old's voice into a 60-year-old man's voice, and all the slang that I'd used and everything all got pulled out without. But as soon as I saw that book, which was presented to me then as a finished product, I went, this will never happen to my work again. And I keep I do keep tight control, but I have an editor that I've worked with for many, many, many books since about The Devil Latch, which was the book after Sleeping Dogs. So, you know, I think of the books in terms of houses, so house number 1. And Alex was an editor of the Oxford Dictionary, and he's also a poet, quite a well-known poet within Australian poetical circles. And he's not the sort to go, we have very interesting discussions, and we both come at it with a strong background in knowing what we're on about. But nothing gets taken out of my work or put in without me saying, and nothing gets put in, to tell you the truth. Nothing, there's not one word in those books that wasn't written by me. There's a lot of horror stories in the industry about books that aren't written very much by the person who's on the cover, and a lot of those books would be books that you would recognise without hesitation. But my books, I don't know. Look, I've been around for a long time. I've been around longer than most of the people in the industry that I work alongside, including all my editors and publishers. And through a lot of stubbornness and a lot of prize winning and a lot of just sometimes flying under the radar and being too difficult for them to have to, you know, easier to just let it go, let it go. What I want, I get, really, but that's not something that you start off having. That's what you get after 30 years. But I always listen to an editor. In fact, I listen to every person who reads a manuscript, not that many people, I don't let them, you know, manuscript doesn't get read by more than maybe 2 or 3 people that I, you know, in the publishing house. But I always listen to every single thing they say and consider, are they right? Only an idiot, an absolute idiot, says only I can make the decision, only my decisions are right. Because sometimes people come up with really good ideas and then you steal them and you put them in the book and you go, I know, I thought of that. And they can never do anything. They just have to suck it up. But yeah, always listen to somebody because they might have a really good idea. And so I'm always, you know, maybe if I hadn't become a surgeon, I would have become a thief. Thanks for coming. Thanks for having me.
No, we're just going to do the prize. I love hickory nuts.